welcome to another edition of our AFBE Leadership Talk Show. Today is going to be a lovely day because we have a very special guest with us all the way from New York, and it's a pleasure to be having her here. But before I introduce our special guest, I'd like to say thank you to my co-host Joy, and to everyone who's made time to join this event. Say thank you. If you've got any questions, just post it in the chat box, and my colleague will be able to pick up the questions and ask Vanessa as we go along. If you have any questions at all during the talk, please feel free to ask your questions straight away. This is the AFBE Leadership Talk, and we aim to inspire effective leadership at the AFBE, and we'll tell you more about it towards the end of the show. So today I'd like to introduce our very special guest, Vanessa Abraham-John. She's the 2017 TNJ 25 Most Influential Black Women in Business. She's also a board member of the Women's Business Development Council organization in Stamford, Connecticut, and is also the Executive Director, Diversity and Inclusion and Talent Acquisition in a Fortune 500 company. Wow. She is born in Jamaica, lives in New York. She is a wife and a mother. And I'd like to say, Vanessa, it is a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Roy. It's a pleasure to be here. And happy Black History Month in the UK. Happy
Black History Month to you too. So for today's meeting, we're going to do it differently. We are going to have a PowerPoint presentation, and it's simply because there's a lot to talk about, and particularly on this particular topic, there's a lot that we can learn from, especially from Vanessa. And so we thought it prudent that we have a PowerPoint slide, which Vanessa was so gracious to create. And I believe this will help educate us, give us pointers about authentic leadership, especially in this time of social change, on the back end of Floyd, and we trying to get diversity into the boardroom and into organizations. So if you bear with us, I will just share a PowerPoint slide. And if you can see it, please just let me know. Is it visible? Let me see, let me change this.
Not yet, Rory.
Not yet. Okay, just a second. Just a second now. Technology, it's eluding me. Okay, now we should be able to see it.
Yeah, can see it now.
Yes, sorry for that hiccup. So we're going to be talking about authentic leadership in a time of social change. And Vanessa is so gracious enough, like I said, to present this PowerPoint slide. She's had over a decade worth of experience in diversity and inclusion, and it'll be very good to hear firsthand from someone who has been able to build up the diversity and inclusion piece within her organization and lead effectively in this particular time. So without further ado, Diane, Vanessa, please tell us about yourself.
So again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you, Roy. Thank you, Joy, for having me here today to participate with the AFBE UK organization during a very special time for you, Black History Month. I'm really proud and honored to lead Linde's Global Diversity, Inclusion, and Organizational Development Strategy. So that's been a new change. And I'm excited to represent my organization, Linde BOC Region UK. A special thank you to my UK colleagues who are on today, Olu Olohuabi, Izzy Okosu, and I see Janet Wright also from our UK organization. They have been incredibly supportive of the AFBE. They've introduced me to the AFBE, and I just want to thank them for their support of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so for those of you who are unaware of Linde, we are the leading global industrial gases and engineering company. We boast 80,000 diverse employees in 100 countries. And really our business is to be the market leader in providing innovative solutions, technologies to various end markets, chemicals, refining, food and beverage, and over the past year, healthcare, right? Medical gases for COVID-19 patients. So today I'm honored to share 3 areas with you, as Roy asked me to share about myself. I'm gonna share my very unusual but purpose-driven path to my current role at Linde. And the second thing I will do is also share some of my key competencies and success strategies that I draw on each day as my North Star to develop my career and to coach others here at Linde. And I will end the presentation today with describing how the unprecedented social justice reckoning of 2020 really caused Linde to reflect, look inward, and make some deep commitments to be a more inclusive and equitable organization, not just for our employees, but also for our communities. So on the first slide I want to talk about is my career journey. I didn't intend to be a diversity officer. I started out as an attorney. So Roy, if you could just share the first slide. I was just someone from Jamaica in the Caribbean who decided that I would go to law school. And I ended up at law school here in the US. I went to a historical Black college, Howard University. I studied corporate law. I started my career sort of in my first phase working in New York City law firms, practicing bankruptcy, restructuring, and general mergers and acquisitions law. But what I didn't know then is that that was preparing me to be a subject matter expert in something that I could take on later in my career. I then joined Praxair, which is now Linde, sort of in that second phase of my career as an in-house counsel. It was during that time, I wasn't yet managing people, that I really started to be a risk taker. I started to raise my hand to take on assignments that no one else wanted, but that was really critical to our business. I became an expert in federal government contracting, something that no one else wanted to do, but something that brought value to our business. So that was sort of my first exposure in risk taking, you know, taking on this new area of law that I didn't study, but that no one wanted, but something that added value to our business. And in taking on that role, I became a change agent within the law department. I started to really impact policy and the way we address some of our contract negotiations. Being that risk taker caught the eye of my leaders. And when it was time for them to say, we need a diversity program, we need someone who can be a little bit bold, but also can build relationships, can be authentic, I was asked to take on the role of the Chief Diversity Officer, and I've been in that role for 9+ years. So my career has really unfolded over 3 chapters. And each of these chapters really involves some competencies that I'm gonna be sharing with you in more details later on. But the 2 key areas have been authenticity and risk-taking. Those 2 things have really allowed me to build strategy that created alignment within the organization. It has caused us, even in this post-merger environment, we went through a big merger 3 years ago with Linde AG, we're now called Linde, to create culture transformation. So that's something that I will also share, how I was able to be true to myself, be authentic, take some risks, but still gain that alignment to execute on our vision. And then I will also share a little bit about our inclusion value at Linde and what that really means for our employees. But over the years, I've been always asked, how do you balance, you know, your career with your family and the boards and all these other things that you do every day? And my simple answer is this: there is no balance. This term started out as a buzzword, a buzz phrase, but it's an ever-evolving concept. it's starting to lose its cachet, because what a lot of women and men are beginning to find out in the workplace is that there really is no balance. It may seem like an oxymoron for me to say that, but the truth is we all have to create our own balance, our own state of equilibrium, the things that motivates us, that energizes us. It can be different for all people. But for me, these are the three things that keeps me balanced. And I call them my 3 Ps, even though they're not described here as Ps, but prioritizing, preparation, and prayer, lots of prayer. So balance is not perfect. It is messy. Sometimes balls get dropped. Sometimes I do not go to the soccer game for my kids. And sometimes I am not here for a 5 a.m. meeting because I have to prioritize my family. So I want to talk a little bit about prioritizing, because that's really what you need to do to create your own balance. We are all different, with different drivers, different motivations, but developing a keen sense of awareness of what motivates you is critical to having your own balance. If you don't even know what motivates you, then you're not going to have your own balance. So I would suggest that you pause, you pay attention to your emotions, and sometimes you need to reprioritize. And even in my weekly prioritizing, or my monthly or my quarterly prioritizing, I have to adjust. I have to be agile. You know, things catch on fire. We have burning platforms at work that suddenly, will capture my attention. But my second P is what gives me that balance. I prepare. The second P of preparation is something that was honed in me as a child. My parents were not college educated, but they were disciplined. They believed in preparing for your day, planning for your week, planning for your month, even for your year. Seek support where it is needed. If I have children at home, I know I need some support with a little nanny help to get my kids on the bus so that I can be here for early meetings. These are things that we have to plan for. And if necessary, we have to pivot and adjust to alternate solutions. But something I've also learned to create balance is saying no sometimes. Saying no is really important to also creating balance. For me, it is important that I spend time with my husband, my children, and also my friends. And not every event I accept, right? There are times when I have to be attuned to what is needed at home, what is needed with my family, and when to say no to a social event. I also try to plan a little break after each big project. If I know I have big events coming up at work, I try to tack on a long weekend at the end of it, something to just motivate me to look forward to. And then finally, community and faith. That's my third P, prayer. I'm a person of faith, and giving back and connecting with my faith energizes me. It centers me. One of the challenges I had during COVID was not being able to go to church. Whatever your place of worship is, find a non-work activity that centers you, that rejuvenates you. It could be yoga, it could be church, it could be your synagogue, it could be your temple, whatever that is. And this is not a strict menu. It doesn't work for everyone. It requires constant reevaluation, re-enhancements, but this is really what works for me. And it really has allowed me to shift through those 3 buckets of my career to where I am today.
Wow, this is amazing. First, thank you for taking this call when we put out the call to you, because you said it's not all social calls that you take. Something that has struck a chord, it's very important that we're hearing something like this with the work-life balance from someone like yourself. Certainly because, you see, what I find in our community, especially here in the UK, is we're always busy. And because we're always busy, we always come up with excuses why we cannot aspire or go for executive roles, management roles. You find engineers who are, very comfortable in their lifestyle. They tell you they've got kids, they've got church, they've got all of this, and they feel taking on a leadership role will add more responsibilities that they cannot manage. But here you are, spitting out the truth. There is no work-life balance. You have to create that balance that will suit you. And I like your 3 Ps. Prioritize, which is very key. What's most important to you? What's most important to your family? You know, preparation and prayer, taking that faith and putting everything together, I think is a very important piece. And, you know, this is something that I think we need to become more conscious and more aware that we are capable of running and leading in executive roles, but also leading our family effectively, which is very important. Now, there was something you said about risk taking, and that's certainly what puts you in the limelight. Tell us about risk taking. Before we go into any other topic, I'm interested to know more about, you know, how you were able to take risks. Like, what prompted you? Is it in your nature, or was it something that you decided you needed to start doing?
So one of the things, that's a really great question. And it's funny because I'm in the middle of leadership training for a program, a diversity program that we have going on at Linde. And yesterday's topic was really about being bold, really taking a risk to set a vision that's not yet thought about, right? Not yet on the map, being a map maker, sort of, you know, creating your own, what if we do this? Testing some assumptions, breaking assumptions, expanding assumptions. I think what we teach our employees is that risk-taking can be learned. It can be a learned behavior, but it can also be part of your natural style. And so before we do any leadership training here at Linde, we have our employees go through a DISC. You know, I'm not sure if that personality test is familiar to those of you there in the UK, but it really tells you what your style is. If you're someone who's dominant and bold, if you are more of a, you know, conscientious type data analytic person, if you're more of an influencing style of person. So risk-taking can be inherent to who you are, and it can show up in different ways over your life. So if you were to talk to my childhood friends, they'd probably say, yeah, you were always a risk taker, but I never thought of myself as a risk taker. I was probably a risk taker with my fashion or with, you know, with social things. But in my career, I've sort of seen myself as a risk taker because I raise my hands for things. I offer to take on assignments that no one else wants. Things that have a high failure rate, I will say I'll do it. So I've always been that person. And over time, it's become part of my personal brand, is that I will take on things that no one wants. I'll stand up in front of a crowd and have a conversation. I will, you know, coach people who are hard to coach, right? I've had other leaders say, hey, can you coach this one person for us? We don't know what to say to this person. So risk-taking shows up in different ways. And, you know, I think to be a great leader, I'm not saying I'm a great leader, but I think any great leader must be able to know when to take risk, right? There's a time to pull back and a time to take risk. You have to be agile. I think last year, with the multiple crises that we had in our lives, in our personal lives and in our professional lives, with COVID and you know, shutting down plants and pivoting to a sort of virtual workplace, taking risk to keep employees engaged. These are things that I sat down and say, hey, let's have a learning together program where we bring employees online each week to learn something new, to upskill on something. So that was part of my risk taking. When I was in the law department, as I shared, federal government contract was, it's tedious. It's a book this thick of regulations. No one wanted to be the expert on that, but I realized it was something that would bring value to us as a company. We had so many federal contracts and no one really knew how to negotiate them. So I took that on, right? So risk-taking has always been part of my fabric, my DNA. I think it's something that I saw in my family. I'm from a family of very bold women. They're not college educated. They're not you know, they don't have PhDs, they're not engineers, but they were always bold. They were entrepreneurial. They would set up shop to do something different, right? They didn't stay home and sort of hide behind a desk or say, you know, I don't have an education, so therefore I will not try something. I think it's part of my DNA, but I think as my career has grown, I've been able to harness it in a way to not just help my own career, but to help my company and to help the people within the company who I am charged with creating a culture for them to feel included. So that's how I would describe my risk taking.
That's very good. So that means you can make a conscious effort and take risks, basically. It certainly shouldn't deter us from pursuing the things that we want to achieve in life. Now, let's come back to your leadership in Linde Group. Certainly, you've been on this journey for about a decade now.
Yes.
Tell us how you have led the diversity and inclusion piece within Linde Group. You know, what's your leadership style, and you know the things that you've achieved, certainly within your organization.
So I wanted to share this slide because this really captures our value. We have 5 core values at Linde, and diversity and inclusion is one of our values. And we use it to unleash potential, performance, innovation from our employees. We're not a bank. We're not, you know, a store. We're not a retail. We don't sell widgets. We don't sell shoes, makeup. We sell to other companies, right? We're in different end markets. We sell to the healthcare market, food and beverage, oil and gas, steel. So really for us, it's about our employees. How do we attract? How do we develop? How do we retain? How do we engage, motivate diverse employees in our communities that are naturally diverse? Imagine if we were in a community that had 50% women, 30% minorities, but we only had white men. What would that mean for our sustainability over the long term? We wouldn't have the best people because we would only be hiring from a small segment of the market. And in fact, even if we were to hire in diverse employees and they don't see the potential for them to grow, they don't see anyone at the top that looks like them, that also would create a revolving door scenario. So what we did is we created a 4-pronged strategy, and it's right here. We focus on talent management end to end, from recruiting to development, to performance management, succession planning. We embed D&I in everything we do. We track it. We're engineers in this company. I'm not an engineer, but our leaders are mostly engineers. And I know I'm speaking to a very heavy engineering group, but this is something that we track and manage. We have KPIs. We hold leaders accountable. The other piece is development, training and development. You know, Linde has a long heritage and history, a strong heritage. We've been around for almost 100 years. So imagine if we were to come in and say to our leaders who have been in the company for 30 years, suddenly, hey, you have to be inclusive. They don't know what that means. So we had to go on a journey of training, not just training our leaders to be more inclusive, but training how to eliminate bias in talent management. And then we also have to train our diverse employees because they're underrepresented, right? What does it mean to be different in a company that has been around for 100 years, very male dominated, very much Caucasian? How do you show your strength? How do you leverage your talent in an organization that doesn't really look like you, right? How do you raise your hand? How do you take risk? How do you be bold? How do you make yourself different and be a differentiator? So those are things that we train on. And then the culture of inclusion. It's something that's elusive to a lot of companies. We're still working on it. We're not perfect at it, but we realize that it's the way we communicate. They always say culture is what people talk about when no one's looking, right? We always say we have a safety culture here at Linde. When no one's looking, are we holding the handrails when we walk down the stairs, right? I find myself doing that when no one's looking because that culture of safety has been embedded in me. We're trying to do the same with inclusion. Are you being inclusive when no one's looking? You know, are we celebrating our people, our heritage of the people that we have? Black History Month, Women's Day, you know, Disability Month, Pride Month, all the things that matter to our employees. We talk about it and we use those days and times and resource groups to educate the larger organization. And then the last piece is accountability. Everything that we treasure, we measure. And everything that we measure, we treasure, right? So we hold leaders accountable to KPIs around diversity and inclusion. We track 8 KPIs every quarter. It's rolled all the way up to the CEO and to our board, and leaders are held accountable. And that's the culture of inclusion and the culture of accountability joining forces. For us, it's about our markets, it's about the talent, it's about new ideas, it's about solutions, but it's also really about equity and fairness. And we have been so pleased and proud to be honored and recognized by so many credible organizations, as you can see on the bottom of this slide, for being best in industry, best in class. And, you know, it's a journey that we're on and we will continue. For us, it brings value. And I think on the next slide, I will share sort of a summary that we know, and we take this to heart. We are better with different ideas. We are better when we're diverse. We are better when we avoid groupthink, right? We will be a sustainable company for our children and grandchildren if we create a culture and an environment and a workforce that is really taking the best of what's available. This is the results of studies by the Harvard Business Review, McKinsey, Forbes. They look at diversity at the top, in the board and in the C-suite, and what they've seen is that there's a financial impact. There's an innovation impact, there's a performance impact when companies are more diverse, ethnically diverse, and gender diversity as well.
This is amazing. I mean, just even seeing the mention of your company in different well thought out magazines is very impressive. There's something you said: the things we treasure, we measure, and the things we measure, we treasure. You know, and that's very key for us, because how can we actually measure the impact of diversity? Certainly, you know, like you said, the likes of Forbes and McKinsey and the rest have all done research to show the impact of diversity, gender diversity and ethnic diversity on organizations, certainly. But even after, you know, seeing these publications, we still face a lot of, how will I put it, rejection, if I may put it that way, or resistance should be the right word, you know. And, you know, we're talking about authentic leadership in a time of social change, you know, and we understand social change to be a transformation of culture, institutions, and functions. And of course, change is not instantaneous, it is slow. You know, you've been in this game for a while, and I'm pretty sure you can attest to the fact that it didn't happen overnight, you know, and we're still going through that transformation, you know. Tell us more about how, you know, we can bring in this authentic piece of leadership and, you know, bring about that form of social change over time. You know, certainly the conversations have started. Some companies, certainly your company is quite proactive, is taking the lead and taking the first steps. We have some companies in the UK, BP and the rest, who are also doing the same, you know, but some companies are still lagging behind, either because they're not listening or they don't know what to do, you know. So tell us a little bit about, you know, what are the next steps? How can we start, you know, taking the leap forward and making these changes?
Absolutely. You said something that, you know, I really think is important to underscore, which is the fact that change is slow, it's hard, but sometimes social change can be a catalyst for talent change. And we saw that at Linde. Sometimes without that external, pressure and burning platform of society changing, we saw after last year, so many companies suddenly started to hire a diversity officer, right? They didn't have one before, which, I'm kind of a little skeptical about some of those, but it really caused us to look inward and say, are we doing enough? Are we doing enough for our employees? Is there a role for us as a global Fortune 100 company to play a part in this social reckoning that was going on? We had a lot of long conversations about that. And I really am excited to share some of the things that we did and some of the results that we've had since then. It really was a tipping point for us. You said I've been on this journey a long time. Last year was my most impactful year. It was also my scariest year in terms of the role that I play in this company. So many of us who are leading diversity, we were sitting on the edge of our seats, just watching sort of in slow motion, everything that was going on and saying, what can we do? How can we steer our companies towards a place where they can be part of the catalyst of change, where we can really have some honest conversations about what is happening in our communities, what is happening with Black employees as they are coming to work and being stopped by police for simple or non-existent reasons. Are people really stressed? What is happening with COVID? Or, which are the demographics that are losing family members to COVID? Like, it really just, all these multiple crises sort of came to a head and forced us to pause and reset. And I'm gonna share with you how I leveraged authentic leadership and risk-taking leadership to really drive change at Linde. And we're still on that path. But first, let me pause and just define these two terms that I'm using sort of interchangeably and bring about the connection for you. Now, this week, unless you've been living under a rock, Facebook had a whistleblower here in the US who met with our Congress yesterday and was on a Sunday night 60-minute show that's very popular here in the US, sharing that Facebook values profits over the safety and security of its key assets, right? The people who subscribe to the platform. Now, I have to admit, I was not shocked, but just hearing how they turned off all the safety filters and, after last year's election here in the US, that if you've been watching it, it sort of became very violent and so forth, really just spoke to my heart about why we need more authentic leaders. And I say this because a key tenet of authentic leadership is to value people, is to value transparency and ethics over profit and just company performance, right? Organizational performance on the stock market or whatever. That is the hallmark of authentic leadership. And that is something I try to bring to work every day. Sometimes it's not comfortable to be authentic. Sometimes it's almost easier to just sort of fall in line with the groupthink of what's going on. But I always step back and say, what is my job here? Why am I here? What is my role as diversity officer in this meeting? Is to speak up and to sort of remind our leaders what's important, our people, right? So it's really about being true to your values, but also knowing what your values are. A lot of people don't even know what their values are. They're not sure of what their inward North Star is. Who do you want to be? We all need to have a North Star. What is it that drives us when we're no longer working or even no longer here on this earth? Like, what is it that people will say about us? And just having the confidence to be that comfortable with your own authenticity. But authenticity, sometimes, as hard as it may sound, it's important because people inherently dislike inconsistency. They dislike when leaders say one thing but do something else. It creates distrust. It demoralizes employees. People are not inspired. If you come across as overly scripted, you're not transparent, if you're unable to even be vulnerable, to be humble at times, to roll up your sleeves and get in the trenches with your employees, to stay late at night if there's a big project going on. Employees truly want to relate to you. They want to be inspired by you. And sometimes when I say that to people, they're like, oh, come on. But, you know, inspiration is not just about being, you know, someone who gets everyone to sort of follow like a cult, but really to motivate employees to just give their best work. And it's, you know, show up as yourself at work. Now, if yourself is not a nice person or arrogant or a yeller, then you probably shouldn't show up as yourself. But have some self-awareness, know what your values are, be sort of have high emotional intelligence, listen to what drives your people, have some convictions, you know, be empathetic. We had an employee this week who called me to say, you know, she's returned from maternity leave this week and she just wasn't ready. She's breastfeeding, she was not ready, she was crying. I said, listen, I am here to help. You've made the right call. We were able to work with her business, her HR team, to just offer her an extended 3 month of a part-time solution to give her some time to get, she's a high performer. She's so high performing that she's the only person in a certain business that does something that we need, right? And I said to the business, are we willing to lose her at this vulnerable time of her life? We need her, she needs us. So that's what it means to be authentic. Now, so again, know yourself, know what inspires you. Look at leaders who inspire. If you're not sure what your values are, find some leaders in your organization or in your community who inspire you, or even online. There are people online who inspire me. I follow them on LinkedIn or whatever. And find out what makes them tick. Find out how they balance their lives and sort of jot down some of the priorities that you think will motivate you. And just be a good listener. Listening actively and intently to people will really just make you a better manager and a better leader. Now, this is something you can work on, right? It doesn't come naturally to everyone. Explore your values, jot down some notes, seek feedback. Ask people who you trust, who are close to you, for some real constructive feedback. You know, what do people think about me when I'm not in the room? What is my brand? And just be open to suggestions. Now, taking risk is related, right? Because sometimes, as I shared, being authentic requires taking a risk. It requires being the only voice in a meeting, or being that person to call up the business leader to say, hey, give this employee an additional 3 weeks of flexibility to return to work. She's a new mom, a first-time mom. Let's be a little bit empathetic. So risk-taking, as I shared, it requires agility. It requires being a learner, someone who is willing to grow, but also a problem solver. And then you can't be so sensitive that if you run into setbacks, that you're going to crumble. You have to be able to take your setbacks with heart, capitalize on them, learn from them, own them. That's something that's huge in our culture here at Linde, is being authentic and accountable to your mistakes or the mistakes of people on your team. If someone calls me and say, hey, something on your team didn't work, I'm not going to throw my employee under the bus. I take it. I said, I apologize. What can we do better? And that's an opportunity for coaching with my employee. But being a leader also requires, you know, being accountable, being collaborative with your peers, your colleagues, and just being able to take that setback.
Wow, that's a lot to take in. You said something, social change can be a catalyst for talent change. And I want to sort of tie 2 things here. Authenticity and taking risk. So one of the viewers, bear in mind, please, viewers, if you have any question, please post it in the chat group, and we can certainly pick up on it in the last, as we go into the last 20 minutes of this talk. Now, he said something about, can risk taking be learned? And you know, he says, you know, for extreme cautious, well, people are extremely cautious, especially from minority backgrounds, as they tend to be in the corporate setting. How do you become a risk taker, especially after so many years of career the disappointments. Now, before you answer that question, because I think, part of your next slide does answer some of those questions, because, far too often you find that people don't want to take risks because of the fear of rejection, or the fear of reprisal, or, how would they be perceived? Would they be attacked? Would they put themselves in a position where they're at risk, because they have done something that they feel is above or beyond their comfort zone? That puts them in a sort of an uncomfortable situation in the organization. And because, people of minority, you become extremely scared as, what will be the reprisal on me? How is this going to affect me? So I think maybe I'll switch to your next slide, which kind of, addresses some of the issues that people face, especially in trying to progress into leadership roles, or at least trying to take risks within their organizations. I think maybe you can shed a bit more light on this.
Yeah, so this was a study from Korn Ferry that we participated in to look at, what's unique to diverse talent? Why are we not moving as fast as our non-diverse peers, as our majority peers? And what they found after studying, hundreds of Fortune 500 companies is that there were 6 common themes that they heard from employees. That there were microaggressions, the constant asking, where are you from? Were you on a track scholarship? How did you end up at that school? Stuff like that. It really demoralizes employees and it causes high turnover. High risk projects. Now, I want to put a pin here because I've been talking about taking risk. Now, there are some what they call glass cliff projects that have high failure rate. What they found is that these were tended like a business region that can never sell product, a business region that's constantly, under constraints and stress. Those were tended to be given to diverse talent. Now, there's a difference between taking a risk for something that you can turn around and be good at. There's a difference between that and taking what they call a glass cliff project that they're only giving to you because they know it will likely fail without additional resources. So you have to sort of have that emotional intelligence to understand the difference. The third thing is that they found that diverse talent, especially for internal promotions, were judged on what they've actually done as opposed to the potential of them growing into something based on their skill sets. They found that white men were given opportunities based on what the organization could see them doing. Oh, I can see this person doing such and such, but Roy has never done that, so we're not going to give him that chance. We have to prove our value over and over. We almost have to start over every time we have a new role. And then being overlooked because of stereotypes, right? This group of people is not smart, or this group of people are not technical, or this group of people, don't know how to write or communicate. We hear that a lot about different diverse segments. And then something I've always heard since I was a child, and I kind of raised my children with this sort of expectation, is you have to do more than most. I think that's just been the story of my life. And I try to instill in my kids that, hey, to be considered on an equal playing field, you're probably going to have to do a little bit more than most. It's not fair, but that's life. And I think this is something, I'm not sure in my generation this will change, but this is something that the study found. But, and then being socially excluded. I mean, now that we're online, it's harder to socially exclude people if we're not traveling or going anywhere. But in the past, we would have, groups of people leaving for lunch, and suddenly one of them has the new job, right? The new opportunity in the group. And that's not something diverse people were included in. And if so there's some tactics that we can use as diverse employees to overcome some of these headwinds, right? So think of a headwind as a wind that's sort of blowing you backwards. And the next 2 slides is really just a quick summary of what I could think of, some things that I think matter. The first is just performing well, right? Performance will always take you to the next level. At some point, there will be stereotypes, there will be unjust assumptions, microaggressions, but if you're value in your work is so high, at some point there will be acknowledgement. Being good at something, right? Being a subject matter expertise. For me, starting out as a lawyer really gave me that subject matter expertise. People know that I'm good with regulatory compliance and other things like that. So I tend to lead the charge with things like that. Raise your hand, take a risk, seek a growth opportunity, right? If you feel you're not growing, speak up. Say to your boss, hey, there's a problem on my team, on our team that no one has offered to solve. I'd like to take a shot at it, right? Knowing how your business makes money. These are simple things that I think people underestimate. If you don't even understand your business model of your company, how they make money, how they drive profit, it's hard for you to add value. And hold yourself accountable. Be aware of your strengths, but also be aware of your blind spots, what you're not good at. Take a class, take a course, ask your OD person in your organization to help with some courses for you to strengthen that muscle. So really driving performance and results will really build a nice foundation under you to overcome some of those headwinds. The other thing that I want to talk about is relationship building and networks, right? So this is more of the softer competencies. Before I talked about harder, more technical competencies. Going back to authentic leadership, what are you known for, right? Who are you? You should have a brand and you should be aware of that brand. And it's about being credible, being honest, being transparent. My second P, prepare for everything. There is not a meeting that goes on that I'm walking into the room that I am not prepared for. I have questions tucked away in my back pocket. I know who is going to speak first. I find out who's going to be in that room. And I know what drives each person. I have data in my back pocket to answer questions if I'm asked. So always prepare, do your research, never walk into a meeting cold, and speak up in meetings. So many times, diverse employees, sometimes because they're the only one of them, the only person who is different, they become introverted and shy, and you're not doing yourself any favors. Speak up about something of value. Give back to your networks. If you're asking people for mentoring and sponsorship, make sure that you're giving them something in return. And be curious, but also have integrity.
Vanessa, just to come in before you move on, would you say, I think when I really like your previous slide on the headwinds faced by diverse talent. And one thing that comes to mind is the imposter syndrome, which we keep talking about in the meeting place, especially with the diverse talent. Would you be able to tie that in, or what sort of advice can you give? Because when I look at it, what I think is, looking at your previous slide, I feel that it's not just something people stumble into and just say, oh, I have imposter syndrome, but there are certain things that add up. So for example, like you mentioned, the microaggressions, that's one thing. If that keeps adding up, or perhaps constantly maybe if your suggestion is being ignored or overlooked, I think it kind of builds up, and then sometimes, people then feel, oh, I'm not going to say anything, or what I say doesn't count. Do you have any advice or anything you can add to what you've said already, just to help on this point?
Yeah, so imposter syndrome is just really hard to manage. I see it, I coach on it. It creeps up on me sometimes. Like, am I really good at this? Do I really belong here? And yes, those microaggressions, those stereotypical statements can really chip away at your self-confidence. And there may come a time when you may have to look at your own organization and see, do I have mentors here? Do I have sponsors? Are people really rooting for me? Maybe this is not a place where I can grow. So sometimes you just have to have that honest conversation with yourself. Whether your values and your ambition for yourself, does it match where you are? Imposter syndrome is psychological, right? We are all here in our spaces, in our companies, in our environments, because we have the qualifications, right? We weren't hired because of our skin color or gender. We are here because we have the qualifications. So I think the best way to overcome imposter syndrome is not to let work consume you. Have balance. So I go back to that balance. Have other things that you're doing in your life. your community organizations, your board, the AFBE, have an internal and external group of what I call your board of directors, people who will give you real feedback, people who you can trust, have people internally. I can't tell you how many women I've never met them in person, but they have reached out to me from Africa, or Africa business or business in Sweden or wherever to say, hey, can you mentor me? I have a problem. I am running into this issue with my manager or with my team, and they put time on my calendar. We meet once a quarter, once a month, every 2 months, whatever. Find people who you trust, who see your value to really, A, give you good feedback, because that's something that you need to know. Am I being seen? I was once told that I was not analytical, and I was in the moment sort of hurt by it, because I'm like, I'm a lawyer. Of course I'm analytical. But the person who told me, someone I trust, and she said to me, this is the perception of you and you need to hear it. Because if you are analytical, then you need to walk into the next meeting analytical, right? With analytical blazing from your forehead, right? And it really changed me. So I think one of the ways to overcome imposter syndrome is to get some good feedback from some mentors, some sponsors, people you trust. Understand how you're perceived, work on it, and adjust those behaviors or those perceptions, change those perceptions. Really working on some critical behaviors and some competencies can really help boost your confidence. But you need to have someone that you're talking to, someone who you can trust. So having that internal and external group, board of directors. I have a group of friends outside this company who are all, leaders in their field, doctors, lawyers, whatever. And we meet online or we text each other to say, hey, I'm running through this issue at work. What do you think? We give each other real feedback. You should have that outside of the company and inside of the company. I think those are some of the things. Work on yourself, seek feedback, try to move the needle, dial those behaviors that you need to work on, and get some good feedback from people you trust.
Wow, Vanessa.
Excellent.
I don't think this time is even going to be enough for us to go through, but I'm very conscious of time, and I would like us to speak about, how you have led in the time of social change. I know you've touched on it already, but I just want us to wrap up with this, because this is very important, as it's a take home, not just for us as individuals, but also for organizations.
Yeah. So I want us to think of change as a catalyst, not as a barrier. And so the first thing is the mindset, right? Change that burning platform, instead of hiding from it, that's a chance for you to use your credibility, your seat at the table, to be a catalyst for something new, something different. As I said, change the map, be a map maker, right? Test assumptions, shatter assumptions about yourself and about what's possible. But the first thing you need is a seat at the table. If you don't have a seat at the table, you can make one, say, hey, I'd like to start an organization. I know in the UK, we're starting an employee resource group. That's a way to have a seat at the table. You're creating that seat at the table. Have credibility. Accountability is something I talked about. Be accountable to yourself. Develop trust and consistency with your organization, and think about how you can bring value. So one of the things we did last year, and it started out with me having a seat at the table, and is me saying, I'm going to use my voice to speak up. So after the George Floyd murder here in the US, there was a moment, a week or so, where I was sitting at home, right? Because we were in lockdown, thinking to myself, what can Linde do? We're not Nike, we're not, a bank, we're not out there in the retail consumer market, but we have diversity and inclusion as a core value. So there must be something that we can do to be an industry leader. And so I called my CEO and I called my CHRO, who was sitting in Munich at the time, my CEO, we were all working from home. And I said, listen, this murder is sitting heavy on my heart. I've been talking to a lot of our Black employees, and I think we don't have to put something out in the media. We came up with this concept that we called advocating for change. And it really was to build awareness through storytelling. It was a way for us not to shame or cancel anyone, but for us to self-reflect as an organization on where we are in our journey towards inclusion. And also for me, as someone, a leader in HR, to say, here are some resources, here are some training tools, here are books and podcasts and other things that you can read to self-educate. We knew we weren't gonna educate everyone, but we knew that we could start a conversation and we could put 3 things in front of the organization that we would ask for, right? So we started out, many of my colleagues on this call today, we invited our Black employees from the UK and from other regions, from Canada, from Brazil, to join us. We invited a Black psychiatrist to join us on the call so that she could mediate and address, people were breaking down in tears, just address some of the stressors and things, really reflecting on mental health. So we really set about to build awareness, self-reflect as an organization, and provide resources to our employees. And if you move to the next slide, I'll share, because I know we're running out of time. This is a journey that we took our company through. We met every Wednesday during the summer months of 2020 with our Black employees, with our director levels and above. We invited everyone to attend. We thought, okay, we'll cap it off at like 200 people per session. We had sold out sessions. We had to add new sessions. There was such a demand. We had our white leaders saying to us, what can I do? What can I say to my kids who are asking what I can do, right? Their children were coming to them to say, what is Linde doing? My children were coming to me. So we went on a journey from being aware that racial injustices exist, to, being empathetic, to being an advocate, to being a truly inclusive organization. And we tried to share about how to be an ally, right? How to use your platform, your voice, to really drive change for people from marginalized communities, underrepresented groups. So it really was about education. We empowered people, and we enabled a culture of allyship to really help people understand how they can play a role. I had people walking into my office saying, I want to do something, but I don't know what to do. I want to give money, but I don't know where to give. So we created a toolkit. We put it on our intranet. It was called Continuing the Conversation. We listed a group of organizations that we had vetted for people to give back to. We got our foundation to double giving, employee matching. So it was awesome. I mean, we went through such a transformation last year. And I would say that it was the hardest year, but for me as a leader, it was my most impactful year. I did my most creative work. I did what I felt was my best work. And I think the organization went through a lot of change and evolution.
Well, thank you very much. Just conscious of time, we might shoot by 5 minutes if that's okay. And that's just because I want us to go through the last 2 slides that you have, because I think it's very important that we do cover them. So in your next slide, you talk about what is our role, because certainly we all have a role to play. And it's very important that we take conscious and active steps, to actualize that role. And certainly within the AFBE, that is what we're doing. So it'd be good to have your take on this as well.
Yeah, this is a slide we shared during last year's conversations. Is what is your role? Do you want to be a bystander during a time of outcry for justice and equity, or do you want to be an ally? And so we shared with our employees this slide, which is sponsor someone who is not like you, someone from an underrepresented group, be a champion for them, take someone under your wing and help to grow their career. Call out bad behavior when you see it, even if the behavior is not directed at you. People from underrepresented groups tend to be afraid of retaliation. They sometimes have no advocate. So if you're someone in a position of power in a overrepresented group, call it out. Be the one to speak up. Use inclusive language. Make sure you're using the right pronouns and swatting away microaggressions and other things of that nature. Use your platform. If you're a leader, give someone the mic to present in a meeting. So that's something that we shared with our leaders. You know, have someone on your team who doesn't look like you present the next time you have a meeting. And demand training. We offer training in this organization. Not all leaders demand it. Not all leaders say, I expect it. So we have trained our leaders, and I want to share with you today. Think about your role during times of change. Do you want to stand on the side? You don't have to be marching with a poster down a street to be an ally. There are ways that you can use your platform, your power, your pocketbook to drive change.
Thank you very much. This is very important. And I think this is a charge and a call to many of us on the call here today. Finally, what final tips, Vanessa, would you give to us?
So, you know, these are sort of my thoughts, sort of the Vanessa tips of the day to end with. We talked a lot about authentic leadership, risk-taking. We always, you know, I always say to people, when people say to me, you know, I want to think out the box, I always say, what box? There is no box in my mind. Anything is possible. I'm here to just break stereotypes and shatter assumptions about me, about who I am. I'm someone with a Caribbean background. I'm from Jamaica. I'm a lawyer. There's so many aspects to who I am. There is no box. So just remove the boxes, remove the silos around yourself, and just think about, you know, what next? What is it that I can do? Be an expert in something. It could be a simple thing. Do something simple well. It could just be that you are known as a great writer, right? Like a great communicator, a great speaker. It could be a simple thing. What is your brand? What are you? When people say Joy or Roy, what are you known for? What do they think when they think of you? Challenge the status quo. Don't accept it. If you work in an organization that has a very stale status quo, speak up, challenge it. Say, what can we do about this? How can we be different? How can we attract more Black engineers? How can, you know, are we recruiting at this school or that school? Back to the preparation piece, right? So always prepare. There's, you know, there's luck and then there's preparation. So opportunities come to us sometimes when luck meets preparation. Always prepare for every meeting. It could be a simple one-on-one with a leader. Have a few questions, be prepared. Know the answers to the questions ahead of time. And mimic success. There are so many people in my life who I admired, who inspired me, and I sort of mimicked them. I said, hey, you know, I kind of like the way this person speaks up in meetings. I'm gonna sort of follow what they do. They're not the first person to speak, but they tend to always have something intuitive and value added to add. So I try to mimic other people who I admire. And lastly, have fun, right? For people who know me, I work hard, but I also know how to sort of let my hair down. I have a good time. I love my little weekend getaways, my holidays. I spend a lot of great time with friends. And you know, we have one life, we have one shot, and it's not just about working hard and driving your career, but try to have a good time as well.
That's excellent. Yeah, thank you so much, Vanessa. There's some questions coming through. I don't know, do we have questions? Can I just breeze through one or two of them?
I'm here. I'll answer questions.
Perfect. Excellent. One just came through. How do you find, Ibim is asking, how do you find the balance between authenticity and adaptability as a leader? That was one of the questions that came through.
Self-awareness.
Okay.
Self-awareness of not just, self-awareness is yourself, but awareness of being able to read a room, right?
Right.
So I know when I go into, let's say, a leadership meeting with my CEO and my CFO and my boss and so forth, I come in with my authentic self. I put some ideas on the table. I know I have about 2 seconds. If they start shutting it down, I adapt, right? But I'm gonna say something, but I'm not so stubborn that you kind of have to know your audience. You have to know who you're meeting with. what their priorities are. They could be in the middle of the stock plummeting or budgets or whatever. You kind of have to know when your window is, and that takes time to develop. It also means knowing yourself, knowing your audience, being able to read a room. So I'd say there's a little bit of a balance between being authentic. The worst thing is to have someone walk into a room with their authentic self. Everyone is saying, no, that's not a great idea, or we don't have the budget for that right now, and they just keep going. You lose credibility. At some point, make your sale, make your pitch, but know when to adjust or bring up an alternative solution.
Absolutely. Thanks, Vanessa. And then I'll probably just lump these two together. I think one of them is asking about how, as a leader, you can manage difficult conversations within your team. That's one part of the question. And the other part is, I know you mentioned talking about how, you work in alignment with a vision or strategy of the organization. So this question is quite interesting because it's saying, how do you drive that organization performance, especially if you don't believe in the new vision or strategy? So I guess this is somebody that's probably not at the top, not the leader. So if you're not aligned with the organizational vision, how do you
if you're not aligned with the vision, values, and mission of your organization, then you shouldn't be there. I think it's as simple. You have to be honest with yourself at some point. Linde is not the only, this is my third company that I've worked for. I've been here for 15 years, but there comes a time sometimes in a company where their new leadership changes or they start to do things that don't fit your sense of integrity and ethics. I mean, look at what's going on at Facebook. How can someone work there right now, just knowing what we've heard this week? So if that's your value, right? But if your value is just to make money and get out, then fine. But there comes a time in one's life when you have to know what your values are and whether you can honestly walk through the door of your organization every way, just knowing that there's a misalignment. So I would say maybe that's not the right place for you.
So much. Yeah. Thank you for that, Vanessa. Yeah.
There was another question you asked before that question. What was the question?
Oh yeah, that was how as a leader you manage difficult conversations within your team. Yeah.
So I think it starts with being credible, being vulnerable, and taking the shots for them. So, I manage people, and sometimes we make mistakes as a team, and sometimes, somebody on my team sends out the wrong PowerPoint or the wrong data, and I get in trouble from my boss or someone else, and I take it for them. I apologize, I correct it, and I move on. I don't name a name. I may call my employee on the side and say, hey, next time we have to be more careful to check this data. But I think when you're, people generally don't like their bosses, and I'm not saying my employees like me, but I think one thing they'll say about me is that I am accountable for them. I never sort of let them take a bullet. I take it for them. And if they have to work late, I'm not out having a drink, right? I'm here with them. My sleeves are rolled up, shoes are off, and we're sitting down together, hammering out what we need to hammer out. And then I think being vulnerable. I'm vulnerable with them to say, hey, I'm not good at certain things, but you are. So I need your help with this. I'm not good with certain technologies that we're now using. And as I do training sessions, there's one employee I have who's really good at it. And I tell her, I need you with me. And when training is over, I'm like, take 2 days off, right? Just go take a holiday. I appreciate you so much. And I think it's just giving that real-time feedback, giving praise when they deserve it, but also having private, discretionary conversations when they need to get feedback. But don't avoid feedback, because that will come back to haunt you. At the end of the year, when you have to give that bad performance rating and you haven't had those conversations all year, you lose credibility. There should be no surprises at the end of the year when you're giving out those performance ratings, because not everybody's going to be a great performer. There's someone who's going to need to have a tough performance conversation, but they should have been hearing it from you all year, and not just in the context of, hey, you need to do better, but how can I help you? How can I help you? Is there something going on at home? I notice, you've not been as sharp as you used to be. You're missing some information that you usually are on top of. Let's have lunch and see what I can do to support you.
Fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you. George, do you have anything else?
I had one burning question, but for myself. I think for me, looking at some organizations, one of the, like you said, I think this time of the movement, social injustice has really awoken a lot of companies, and they're wanting to do more. They're investing more in their employer networks, trying to promote ethnic diversity, for example. But one of the key things that I found is that you mentioned something about that representation in the senior leadership. And I think, I don't know if it's, generally the UK, or where we are location wise, but I think a lot of companies are kind of struggling with that. The intention is to have a diverse pool of senior leadership, but we just don't see it. And I don't know if you have any insights on maybe something that at Linde, maybe something that was implemented, but how can we actually get to that place where we can truly at this point look at our organizations and see that representation, because it's really, really key, I think, for us really to move ahead, from just the manager level into, senior leadership and executives. So yeah, right. Any advice would be?
So yeah, I do, because we addressed that, right? So we addressed lack of representation. It was one of the three, remember I said we had 3 asks that came out of those advocating for change conversations, was to double representation over the next 10 years. If my company had turned to me and said, hey, we're going to promote you because of these conversations, I would say, whoa. Like, I don't want anyone to promote me because of my ethnicity. We have to make sure we're being thoughtful. We're not disenfranchising anyone. Diversity shouldn't be the sort of the end game, right? What we did is we put together a Black Talent Initiative, and we pulled a list of the most highest performing Black talent in the US over the last 3 years. We didn't look at someone who had a fluke of a year. We looked at 3 years of results. And then we looked at how long they've been in their roles. If someone had been in their roles for over 5 years, we knew that they would be a retention risk because they hadn't had any career development. We boiled that list down to, I'm not going to give any numbers, but we had a tangible, real list of Black talent that everyone agreed was solid, high performing, subject matter experts, all those things that I shared on that slide. And we met with their VPs and the senior leadership to say, we got to do something with these people in the next year, or else we're going to lose them. And we put together some proactive development. Some of them have been relocated to different regions. Some of them are now leading their functions. Of that list, we've had an over 40% rate of advancement this year. And so we are proudly saying to our organization, we made a promise and we took action. It's not perfect action, but it was after having no Black talent being advanced in a few years. This year, we were able to say 40% of this list that we put together, we advanced, we developed, we advanced, we stretched into well-deserved roles, right? So I really want to underscore that point. This wasn't just about, suddenly addressing representation with the one Black person we have. It was about really looking at performance and retention risk and people who had not been developed over time, and really just putting our hands on their development plans and really getting them the development that they needed. So being thoughtful and being strategic.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. You have said it all, and we have even overrun our time by almost 15 minutes. That shows you how exciting this talk has been. Certainly, I have taken a lot from this, and I believe organizations as well who would have tuned to this will have taken a lot from this. You have said it all: social change, leadership, authentic leadership in a time of social change, taking risk, and be authentic is the summary for this particular talk. The video for this talk will be available in the next 2 weeks. So if you wanted to go back to it, to watch it again, we will put it on YouTube and we will send the video out to everyone. Thank you to Joy, my co-host. And Vanessa, thank you again very much. For those of you who are not aware of AFBE, a link has been put in the chat group about AFBE. We have our gala nights coming up, which was supposed to have been held in 2010, but we know why it's been shifted to 2021. This will be happening on the 21st. I think we have barely 20 tickets left out of almost 300 tickets. So if you haven't gotten your ticket, please get your ticket. It will be a night to remember, a night of diversity, a night of inclusion, and certainly a night of awarding talents within the AFBE community, internally and externally. Thank you again to everyone who's been patient enough to stay till the end of this talk show. We do appreciate. And again, thank you. Our next talk will be next month. And we will be speaking with one of our leaders in the UK, Tunji Akintoju, and it will be a leadership journey against the odds, which will be also an exciting talk. The event's advertisement will go out tomorrow. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely night.